Jessica Machacova, who's the Senior Policy and Advocacy Officer at the European Anti-Poverty Network.
Thank you very much for inviting EAPN to this hearing. It's a very important moment for us, and we would like to thank Mr. Rapporteur in particular for the excellent draft report that you submitted, and we hope that the Shadow Rapporteur will keep the same spirit or a similar spirit across negotiations. About EAPN, the European Anti-Poverty Network, we are a network of national anti-poverty networks present in 31 countries. We also have 13 European organizations within our membership, and we work directly with people experiencing poverty who directly feed into our advocacy work. We advocate for the eradication of poverty in Europe, and we also ensure that impacted communities, people experiencing poverty, are included in EU decision-making. And this is precisely from their experience that our advocacy is based. We have been asking for an EU anti-poverty strategy since the creation of the network in 1990 for 35 years. First, an ambitious strategy. What do we mean by that? So far, EU initiatives such as the EU 2020 strategy, such as the Lisbon strategy, have been, to our perspective, effective. And we can see it both from quantitative and from qualitative feedback. When it comes to quantitative data, we can see that over time, the evolution of the at-risk of poverty or social exclusion rate, the ROP, has been quite stable in the EU. So in the graph, which is on the PowerPoint, we have included data since 2010 because the methodology has been aligned since this date, but we can make the same explanation or the same feedback from even before. We can see that statistics have been stagnating, and as it was mentioned in the introduction, the 2024 statistics are following the same line. When it comes to qualitative experience from the members, every year EAPN publish a so-called Poverty Watch, which basically gives the experience of impacted communities when it comes to poverty. And every year this report shows increasing hardship, more and more complex forms of poverty, and more and more dismantling of social protection system and public services. When it comes to the current target of the EU, so the Porto target on poverty reduction, in theory, the EU is supposed to reduce by at least 15 million people at risk of poverty or social exclusion by 2030, including at least 5 million children. However, in practice, and that was mentioned in the Joint Employment Report of the European Commission of this year, only 1.6 million people have been lifted out of poverty between 2019 and 2023. Our analysis at EAPN is that it's not a matter of target or not being having enough tool. It's first and foremost a matter of ambition. And with the right political ambition, we will be able to have the right tool. This is why we're advocating for this EU anti-poverty strategy to commit to eradicate and not only alleviate or manage poverty. And in our position paper, which we published in April this year, we advocate for an alignment of the anti-poverty strategy with the target set in the Sustainable Development Goal, and in particular, a reduction of 50% of people in poverty by 2030, of all forms of poverty, because, of course, we cannot expect this anti-poverty strategy to eradicate poverty by itself. Second point, a comprehensive strategy. We think that the EU approach to poverty has so far been incomplete, with the first focus on employment, socio-economic factors, and more as using poverty reduction as a tool to increase competitiveness and growth. At EAPN, we are fighting this narrative, and we think it's urgent to capture the extent and the complexity of poverty. First of all, poverty is a fundamental rights violation. This is about human dignity. This is about equality, non-discrimination, and equal participation in society. Second, poverty is also much more than just material deprivation. It includes and involves social, psychological, and political deprivation. And third, we need to consider and take into account the fact that poverty has its roots in systemic and structural injustice. Mr. Oliveira also mentioned it in the introduction. We need a structural and systemic approach, and in practice, what does it mean? We need to take into account the fact that poverty is a result of capitalism, of patriarchy, of ableism, heteronormativity, colonialism, and racism, and so on and so forth. We need this systemic approach to have an effective anti-poverty strategy. In our position paper, not only we are putting together a list of priorities for the anti-poverty strategy to be based on, But also we advocate for adequate funding through the MFF, but also being through a stronger focus of the European semester on social inclusion, especially when it comes to promoting austerity policies. We think the European semester should be urgently turned into a social semester. We also advocate for a multi-governance approach, so using the EU anti-poverty strategy to strengthen local and national anti-poverty strategies, and we also advocate for including EU candidate countries. 12 priorities that we are coming up with in our position paper. Our first 5 priorities are based on the European Pillar of Social Rights and its principles. And we think the European Pillar of Social Rights is a crucial basis for the anti-poverty strategy, but also in order to capture the complexity and the multidimensionality of poverty, we need to go beyond its scope. And our priorities 6 to 12 are actually focusing on issues, topics which are beyond sole remit of the EAPSR, of DG Employment and Social Affairs, and of the Employment Committee. We are advocating for the recognition of socioeconomic discrimination, ensuring that climate change is taken into account, digital rights, and so on and so forth. We'll go through directly involving the participation of people experiencing poverty. We are advocating for a committee of people experiencing poverty involved at all stages of the anti-poverty strategy. And this involvement of impacted communities will be, as a concluding point, crucial to have an anti-poverty strategy which leads to poverty eradication and not only reduction of poverty. Thank you very much.